Trinadapi Sunichena Taror Iva Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari Harinama 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 Eva Kevalam Kalo Nastyeva 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 Gatiranyata. Thank you, everyone, especially His Grace Yudhishthir Das, for this privilege of speaking about Krishna. We sing the Tulsi prayers and we beg Tulsi, please give me the privilege of devotional service. We learn from Lord Chaitanya that love of God is already there in the heart. Everyone has it. Doesn't matter who you are. Every living soul has Krishna consciousness already there in the heart. But it simply has to be revived. It simply has to be awoken. So the purpose of our Krishna consciousness movement, which, by the way, you belong to, we are the Hare Krishna movement. So it is our responsibility to first of all inspire ourselves. When we do our daily sadhana, we should keep in mind that the first function of this chanting or the worship of the deity or any spiritual practice that we're doing, the objective should be to become enlivened, enthused. Those of us who are chanting the Gayatri mantras given in ISKCON, there is this word, prachodayat, which means you become enthused, you become enlightened, you become enlivened. That is given by Guru and Krishna, or Lord Chaitanya. They inspire us, they enthuse us, they enliven us. So your sadhana time, which I always preach, is the most important time of the day. Psychologists, when they are counseling families, they'll tell the husband and wife, are you spending quality time with each other? Are you spending quality time with your children? Because nowadays, like for instance, my parents, my father worked 2 jobs. My mother stayed home and took care of 4 nasty boys. But now we are so advanced. Now the husband and the wife have to work 2 jobs, and still they can barely make ends meet. So there seems to be sometimes problems. So the psychologists, they tell the family, oh, you need to spend quality time together. So I preach that you need to spend quality time every day with Krishna. Every day you should be spending quality time. Your japa should be quality time spent with you and Super Soul, your best friend. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I am your best friend. Or in the song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he's quoting Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya says to the conditioned souls that other than me, who is your real friend in this world? And then Lord Chaitanya, through this song of Bhaktivinoda, Lord Chaitanya is saying, I have brought the medicine which will wipe out the disease of Maya, the disease of illusion. So our chanting that's our medicine. And we need to spend quality time every day hearing and chanting. Lord Chaitanya taught that you are given a creeper of devotion. It's planted in your heart at the time of initiation. The spiritual master plants this bhakti lata bij, the seed of devotion in the heart. But Lord Chaitanya, when explaining this to Rupa Goswami, says that it is the duty of the gardener to water that seed. It's not the duty of the spiritual master. When the spiritual master plants that seed, you have to become a gardener. I heard somebody talking just when I got here. So those like my father's second job, he had a nursery. So his main job, he was a mechanic. I come from New York. I just went to see my father this past weekend. He's 92 years old. And I told him, I was just there, so he was sitting next to me, and I told him what I'm going to tell you, that Lord Chaitanya was telling Rupa Goswami that the gardener, the devotee, has to nourish that creeper of devotion by the watering process of hearing and chanting. So I was explaining to my father just on Sunday, I said, my father, you were my first guru. And I told my father, you don't know that I use you as an example in many lectures. My father was like, really? I said, yes. Because my father had this nursery. And when I was young, how old are you back there? 13. All right, so when I was 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, on Saturday, my father wouldn't allow me to play baseball. I had to go to the nursery. And what was my job? My job was to pull weeds. And my father, and I reminded him, I said, you always used to tell me, pull the weeds out from the root. Because if you just pull the top of the weed, because the root is still there, what's going to happen in a few days? That same weed is there, and you're going to have to go back and do it again. But so my father said, you got to get your fingers. He didn't give us any implement. You got to get your fingers down in there into the ground and get the weed out of the root. And so by the end of the day, your fingers were dirty and black and crusty. And I used to hate that. I hated that. My father went, you got to, go to man, I want to go play baseball. No, you're going to the nursery. And again, the same lecture. Nicky, pull it out I know you told me half a dozen. And it was because you had to go in there. So then we learned from Lord Chaitanya. He was telling Rupa, I remember the first time I read this, perhaps 1973, 74, when I first read that. Lord Chaitanya was also saying the devotee has to be on guard against the weeds of offenses. And as soon as the gardener sees a weed, he has to pull it out. So I was thinking, I can't believe it. My father has been telling this since I was a kid. Of course, he was referring to a thing, but it was something that was going to tie in. So I will never forget this example given by Lord Chaitanya, because it's so concrete. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama. So whenever my wife brings me back home, because I don't want to go, but my wife, she insists every couple of years, you have to go see your father, you have to go see your family, your brothers. So whenever I go back, as I'm driving from the airport to where my father lives, Now he lives with our youngest brother. As I ride down that Southern State Parkway, all these memories start kicking in. And I remember, oh, remember that? You did that stupid, ooh. And I'm driving, and then I say, oh, you remember that? Ooh. All these memories come back. And then when I see my three brothers and their families, and they're talking, and I'm trying to get little preaching in there every so often, try to get something about Krishna in there. And by the end of the time that I spend there, I reflect, especially on the plane ride home, I reflect, boy, if I hadn't stumbled upon Krishna, if I hadn't gotten Prabhupada's books, if I hadn't eaten prasadam, I shudder to think what I would have turned out to be. I look and I say, oh man, I'm so glad I was saved by Prabhupada, by the devotees, by Prabhupada's books, by this movement. A whole different life has come about simply by Daivi Shakti Devi Dasi giving me my first book, Transcendental Teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, 1972 summer. And I took that pamphlet, and as soon as I read the first paragraph, I went, wow, I like this. Because back then, 72, it was all of a sudden hip to be spiritual. And there was all these yogis, and everybody was talking about this guy, Guru Maharaji. He was God. God had come. And I knew right away, this is garbage. This is not, no, God, give me a break. At least I knew that much. And I remember they gave me one of his pamphlets, and I tried to read it. It was just all this gobbledygook. But as soon as I read Prabhupada's book, the first paragraph, So I read that pamphlet cover to cover, and I liked everything Prabhupada was saying. I said, yeah. And on the back of the pamphlet was a picture of Prabhupada like this. Very grave. I said, yeah, this is my guru. This is him. But Maya once again covers you. You forget. Then 6 months later, I'm in Port Authority bus terminal. I'm on my way to Columbus, Ohio, to pursue my dream. My dream was to become the next Bob Dylan, John Lennon, Jimi Hendrix. My dream. It's all I ever wanted. From the age of 13 to 22, I had only one dream. I was going to become the next great Elvis. So I was going to Columbus, Ohio to make it. But at the bus station, that same girl that I had met months before, completely different place, there she was, Daivi Shakti, and she looked like an angel, so pure. And I was a hippie, so I had hair down to here, I had a huge beard. I thought I was so cool. And that girl looks, and she remembered me. And so she had this big book, Krishna. So I gave her $10. And she was so beautiful, I wanted to touch her hair. But gently, nicely, she just pushed my hand away. I understood. Don't touch. This is a pure girl. She was so nice. So on the bus, I tried to read the book, but this time, there were all these long words. Pradyumna Das Adhikari. Jaya Dvaita Das. I said, ooh, geez. Too many big words. And it was night too, so I just closed the book. So I hooked up with my manager. My manager was a big, big atheist. He belonged to this group called Mensa. So he considered himself very intellectual. And I was dumb, I was stupid. I didn't know anything. But I wasn't an atheist. I always believed in God. At the age of 5, I knew God was in my heart. I knew that at the age of 5, perhaps from a previous life. So he would try to preach his atheism to me, and but he was my manager. And I was playing in the one club, but I was miserable. And I remember one night at the end of the show, it was 12 midnight, we go back to the house, and I'm just unhappy. I'm just not happy. I'm playing music, but I'm not happy. So I went to my room and I found that Krishna book. And I said, I'm going to read this book tonight. So I sat down on the floor. I don't know why I sat down on the floor. I just sat on the floor. And I took out chapter 1, chapter 2, 3, 4, 5. I read chapter 6 is when Krishna kills Putana. By now it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I finished chapter 6 and I said, that's it. I'm joining Prabhupada's movement. The next day, when my manager, because I was living with him, I gave him the news. And he, for the next 2 weeks, tried to deprogram me in all different ways. But I was determined, I am going to join Prabhupada's movement. And he gave all these arguments. I spent so much money on you. But by this time, Prabhupada had captured me. I didn't care about anything. So he told me, well, you at least have to finish out the 2 weeks engagement. I said, no problem. But after 2 weeks, I'm going. So for 2 weeks, what did he do? He smoked marijuana right in my face. He tried every conceivable argument because he's an atheist. And me going to join the Hare Krishna movement, that just made his blood curl. For 2 weeks, he tried to deprogram me. And even as I'm getting on the bus, he's right there in my ear. You don't have to do this. You can do your music and be a devotee at the same time. But I said to myself, stay away, Satan. He was right as I'm getting on the bus. He's still in my ear. As I'm getting on, he's still trying to convince me. The door closed. I sat down on the seat and I said to myself, okay. And then I remembered that I owed my father money because I had gone to a half a year of college before I became a hippie. I went, not even a half a year, half a semester. After a half a semester, I didn't want to go to college. And so I owed my father some money. So I felt bad. Even though I had read somewhere, Prabhupada had said, when one surrenders to Krishna, he has no more material obligations. But I said to myself, well, I'll pay him off and then I'll join the temple. So that was my plan. And when I got home, my father, when we were children, every summer he had these clippers like we do in the ashram. And every summer my father would give us crew cuts. So I asked my mother, where are those clippers? So I took the clippers. Now I didn't know anything. So I took the clippers and I shaved off my hair. I shaved off my beard. My mother went. I didn't know. I didn't think about Shika. I just knew I'm not my hair. I'm not my beard. Then the next day, my brother, my eldest brother, he had a rock band. And he was going to play in this college, Hofstra College. So I decided to tag along. And I'm sorry. I was still in Maya. I smoked some hashish. So when we got to the college and his band set up to play, again, I was very, very unhappy, miserable. And so my brother's band is playing, and I'm so lost. I just sat down on the stage right by the big guitar amplifiers on the floor. The band's playing, and I'm on the floor. Just like, what am I doing? All of a sudden, I turn my head, and there's a pretty girl going. I'm going, oh, illicit sex. This is great. And she goes, are you a devotee? I said, devotee? No, but I want to know. I want to be a devotee. She goes, oh, I was a devotee for 3 years. What? And she said, yeah. She says, I got to go to class right now. When I finish my class, we'll talk. So I was just waiting, and she did what she said. After class, she came, and I started asking all these questions. What's the temple like? Prabhupada. All these questions. And then after a few minutes, I got to go to class. She'd go back. So the whole day, she would go to class, comes talk to me. At the end of the day, 3 o'clock or so, I don't know why, I said, can you take me to the temple? She goes, oh, okay, I'll take you. So we get in her car, and we drive to her house. And when we get to her house, she cuts up some fruit, and she gives it to me. I never had cut fruit. This was a new thing, cut fruit? Wow. And she gave me some books. But back then, they were publishing Bhagavatam in single chapters, second canto. Each chapter was a little book. So she gave me some, and I'm reading, eating the fruit. I think it was apple. And when she comes back, she's got on a sari, she's wearing tilak, and it's like, wow, a goddess. And she gives me some beads. She goes, now we're going to go to the temple. So she shows me how to chant, and she's driving and chanting on her beads at the same time. And then I'm in the front seat, and so we're chanting. And we get to the temple, Brooklyn. We park the car, and she notices there's a lot of devotee activity outside. And she goes, oh, there's Jadharani, and there's this. And we get to the temple door, and she goes, Prabhupada's here, Prabhupada's here, Prabhupada's here. And I'm going, wait, what's going on? We entered the temple, and it's like magical mystery land. I see these devotees, and they look like Marines. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. It's like, wow, man, I'm not messing with these guys. They're just chanting like fires coming off their beads. And they take me into the temple room, and there is Black Govinda. And I'm going, wow, this is cool, man. And then after a few minutes, she goes, this girl, her name was Devi Dasi. She had left the movement and was going to college, but she did this. She took me to the temple. So once we got to the temple, she went somewhere, and someone took me downstairs. Downstairs in the basement was where they served prasad. So maybe it was 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and they said, here, sit down on the floor. And they gave me a piece of wax paper. And on this wax paper is this green slop. And I don't know. They said, you should eat this. So I took that green slop. I took one taste. I jumped up. Oh, give me more. Give me more. This is great. Give me more. And they said, you got to come back tomorrow. I said to myself, oh, man, I can't get this food anywhere in New York. I'm coming to this temple for the food. Oh my God. Then they take me upstairs. And upstairs in this one room, all the devotees from the temple are sitting down. And there's about to be a drama. And in the back, I'm sitting, for some reason, I'm sitting right up front. And there's a whole room, maybe 60, 70 devotees. And in the back, Prabhupada is sitting on a rocking chair. And every so often I turn back to look at Prabhupada, and there's a sannyasi, and he's rubbing Prabhupada's hand like this. And I'm going, is that guy gay or what? The guy even looked gay. Not Prabhupada, the sannyasi just looked weird. He kept doing this to Prabhupada. So the play went on. Play was good. Then everybody left the room and came out into this hallway. And I was back. And then Prabhupada came out. And everyone paid their obeisances. I wasn't paying my obeisances. But when Prabhupada came out, this light, you know what is an aurora borealis? You know what that is? This aurora borealis was coming towards me. And I just figured, oh, I got to bow down. So I bowed down. I swear, it was very distinct. This aurora borealis was coming from Prabhupada. And when I went on the floor, I said, oh, man, this is great. I have found the modern Jesus. Oh, man, this is great. Then I meet the devotee girl that brought me. And she goes, I've decided to move back into the temple. And I said, well, I need you to take me home. And she goes, no problem, I'll take you. And I said, but I want to come to the temple again. She goes, I'll take you. She was so nice. So I can't remember if we went to my house first. I got some stuff because that night I had to play in Greenwich Village because I was paying back my father by playing music in Greenwich Village. So she drove me home, and then we went to her house. And when she went to her house, all hell broke loose because her parents flipped out when she told them that she wanted to move back into the temple. So they were very angry, and they wouldn't give her the keys to the car. They said, if you're going to join the temple, you got to take the train. So she said, you don't worry, you come with me. So we go on the train, and the train takes us to the Brooklyn station, and it's midnight. And I'm like freaking out. Midnight, Brooklyn? And we get to the train station, the stop, and she goes, okay, it's midnight. We have 3 hours. The temple doesn't open for 3 hours. We have to find some place to sleep. She said, don't worry, I'll find us a place. And I'm going, we're in Brooklyn. So I couldn't believe it. This Hare Krishna girl sticks out her thumb in the middle of Brooklyn. I'm going, oh, my parents told me about this. I'm going to die. We're going to get kidnapped. I'm going to get murdered. I'm going to get raped. This girl is like, she's saying, hey, don't worry, just, she sticks out her thumb. Within 10 minutes, car stops. And I'm going, this is it. I'm going to die tonight. She talks to the guy. We get in the car. And she tells me, just chant. All of a sudden, she tells the driver, stop here. And I'm going, what now? So the guy lets us out. And this girl, devotee girl, says, wait here. I'm going to go into this bar. Just wait. So I'm like, here I am in the middle of Brooklyn, waiting for her. She comes out of the bar with the keys to an apartment. Somehow or other, she found somebody in the bar who let us stay in their apartment. Don't ask, I have no idea. And I'm just like, I don't believe this is like I must be dreaming. So we go to the guy's apartment. She goes, it's late. You should take rest. I have a few rounds to chant. So she's finishing up her rounds. I'm sleeping on the couch. Next thing I know, it's time to go. Time to go. Once again, sticks out her thumb. Within a few minutes, a car stops and takes us to the temple, door-to-door service. My mind is blown like a chickpea hit by a baseball bat. I am like, I'm tripping. We go for Mangal Artik, and the temple room is packed. Vishnu Jan Swami is there, and all these big devotees, and it's Mangal Artik, and there's hardly any room. And then japa period, and devotees are pacing, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. And there's Pushkar. You know Pushkar? Pushkar's got his shlokas, and he's chanting Bhagavad Gita shlokas. And then Prabhupada comes down to give class. Now, Prabhupada's accent is just it's new to me. So I'm having a hard time understanding what Prabhupada is saying. I can barely make out what he's saying. The class finishes, and everybody goes to the airport. I'm not invited. So I'm like the only person in the temple. And one devotee girl, I think it was Rukmini, said something to me. But they didn't invite me to go to the temple. So Prabhupada then went to the airport to go to LA temple. I stayed for breakfast, delicious breakfast. I think it was some kind of cereal, but it was cereal I never had before, but it tasted, prasadam tasted like nothing. I loved that prasadam. So I would go to the temple whenever I could. And as the weeks went by, I remember one time I went and Jayadvaita Das Brahmachari was in the temple room chanting japa. It was like the afternoon. So I said to him, I'm thinking of joining the temple. And he said, well, you should come every day for 2 weeks. So I said, how am I going to do that? I can't come every day for 2 weeks. And when I would go to the temple, there was one devotee, Atindriya Das, and he would always engage me in service, cleaning, sweeping. And while he would engage me, he would ask me questions, and he would remove all my doubts. And I remember one time I asked him about John Lennon, because John Lennon was my guru. So he said, John Lennon? He's a demon. And I went, really? And he told me some weird story about John Lennon. And so from that day forward, John Lennon was a demon, because Tindriya Das told me that John Lennon was a demon. Because back then, when anybody preached, they always imitated Prabhupada, demon. That's how you preached. If Prabhupada did something, you did it. And of course, what was the mantra? Prabhupada said. If they wanted you to do anything, Prabhupada said. Later on, we found out, Prabhupada said, they are saying I said so many things I never said. But for years, that worked. They could get you to do anything. Prabhupada said. Oh, okay. Prabhupada said. So I started going to the temple. I remember the first Sunday feast. The first Sunday feast that I went was exciting, because I went downstairs to see if I could get the food fast. Then all of a sudden I hear all this commotion. And I look out, because it's the basement, the windows are on top, but I could see. And I see that the temple is being attacked by people from the neighborhood. Somebody was throwing a rock, and I think they even broke the front door, the glass of the front door. And I looked out, and there was the temple president, and his head was stuck between iron railings, and somebody's hitting him over the head with a shoe. I'm going, wow, this place is exciting. But I wasn't going to get involved in the fight. Then all of a sudden, so there's all this commotion and stuffers, and one devotee I could see, he comes out of the door and goes like this, stop! And everything stops. All the fighting stopped when that one devotee was like Moses, stop! And it was like, wow. And it stopped. All the fighting stopped. And the Sunday feast continued. And I remember the Sunday feast was like the greatest thing. All this different, and everything was, oh my God. And they had this thing. And I said, this is great. What is it? And someone said, that is samosa. Oh, that samosa was so good. Oh, that first Sunday feast. I don't know how many plates I ate. And then finally, so I started going to the temple in March. And then finally, I still remember the day, July 15th, it was a Sunday, 1973. I wrote a note on my parents' refrigerator, joining the temple. And I had a musician friend, and he agreed to drive me. And like the atheist guy, all the way he was trying to convince me, come on, you don't have to do this. We can have a band together. We can make it. But I was determined. I had my suitcase. And like the other, all the way, the whole drive, he was trying to deprogram me. I got to the temple door, opened the door, and joined the temple. Best decision I ever made in my life. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Krishna. So, because seeing my father, seeing my brothers, if I hadn't done that, who knows what kind of life I would have had. And since then, it has been a fantastic journey. Here I am in Encinitas, California. Here I am. So much over the past 40 years. I've traveled the world. I've been to exotic places. I've eaten wonderful food. And everywhere I go, there are nice devotees who, even if you're meeting them for the first time, because they're devotees, they make you feel like you're family. I love that about Prabhupada's International Society for Krishna Consciousness, because it makes you, no matter where you go. For instance, I go every year to Panama and Santiago, Chile, and there are devotees there. And just like I feel with you, I feel at home, I feel like family. When I go there, it's the same thing. That's only one of the many gifts Prabhupada has given us, this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And one thing I have read recently, one thing I read that I always thought, but I had never read before. There is a section in a book called the Chaitanya Bhagavat, and it has to do with Haridas Thakur, the Namacharya. I love Haridas Thakur. I love hearing and reading about Haridas Thakur. Why? Because he's so humble. I love Haridas Thakur because he's so humble. Even when I'm with devotees, I love to be around the simple, humble devotees. They're the best to be around. The simple, humble devotees. The ones that are quiet, they do their service, they do so much service, never in the limelight. Every temple has their devotees who are like that. So sweet and humble.